All right. Make sure we're recording. Okay. Welcome everyone to the technical standards underpinning the architecture and reference framework part 2, OpenID for VCI. This is brought to you by our fantastic workshop presenters, Kristina and Oliver. Part 1 of this happened 2 days ago on Monday. That video is up on the OpenWallet Foundation YouTube. It's on the OpenWallet Foundation blog. We've also posted it to the OpenWallet Foundation Discord. And also in the description of the video, we've included some of the links that were shared last time. As with all Linux Foundation meetings, this is held in the Linux Foundation competition policy. If you have any questions about these matters, please contact your company counsel, or if you're a member of the Linux Foundation, feel free to contact Andrew Updegrove of the firm Gesmer Updegrove LLP, which provides legal counsel to the Linux Foundation. In addition, we have a Linux Foundation Code of Conduct, and the link is there. I will put the link in the chat so folks can check it out if they want. It can best be summed up as be excellent to each other, be kind to each other, be respectful of each other. That's how we work, and we want everyone to get something out of this. And lastly, get involved. Open source, this code doesn't write itself. It is created by amazing people who contribute this code and this work and their knowledge and their effort, including workshops like this, where Kristina and Oliver are sharing all this work and their knowledge. The OpenWallet Foundation has special interest groups. The OpenWallet Foundation has code projects. We can't thank you enough for joining us today, but also please consider getting involved. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to our awesome presenters. And I'm also going to mute. Kristina and Oliver, it's up to you.
Thank you very much. All right. Hello everybody. So my name is Oliver Tebru, and Kristina Yasuda is also co-presenting with me. So we are both OpenID4VCI editors, and Kristina is actually also the DCP co-chair. So today's focus is on OpenID for verifiable credential issuance. Previously, we already had the last session, OpenID for verifiable presentations. So this is really a protocol which allows you to have your wallet getting a credential from an issuer, an interoperable standard that's going to be defined, or that is defined in the OpenID Foundation. So I just have a few very brief intro slides, and we'll also talk about some updates, and then we can do the questions. And so first of all, what are the highlights of the OpenID for verifiable credential issuance specification? We can tell, the first implementers draft was published on April 1st. So we are working on the second implementers draft right now. But in general, OpenID4VCI is one of the core features was always that we had kept in mind is easy to use for developers by trying to leverage existing standards, existing data formats, and so on, which means in that specific case, it's based on OAuth2 and uses JSON, charts, and all that good stuff. Various security levels can be supported. So if you have a high assurance issuer, for example, for a PID, that's supported, but also like lower assurance use cases are also supported, which depends on the requirements and also the UX that you want to get out of this. And obviously also various different business requirements and user experience can be achieved. We support different flows depending on your user experience requirements. And it's also possible to hook into different trust frameworks. One of them is the obviously EUDIs, which is very important, but also things that came out of the mobile driver's license standard, for example. And as with all OpenID4VCI specifications, also OpenID for verifiable credential issuance supports various different credential formats. So for example, we have defined credential formats and profiles for ISO MDocs for IETF, OAuth, IETF SD short VCs, W3C VCDM with data integrity, or previously known as linked data proofs. And I think last time a question came up if this also supports CKPs. Yes, I think we also have a profile for unknown creds, but if there are any other, like emerging credential formats in the future, OpenID4VCI will also be able to support those use cases. But the credential formats themselves, they are not defined by the OpenID4VCI specification. They are out of scope. So OpenID4VCI refers to external specification for that. For example, IETF specs, ISO specs, or W3C specs, to name a few. As mentioned initially, OpenID4VCI is fully based on OAuth. So it actually introduces one additional resource endpoint, which is the credential endpoint. And so the idea is that you would do a normal OAuth 2 flow, where the wallet in that case is the client, and they would request authorization to get the credential issued to the wallet. The result of the OAuth 2 flow is typically it's an access token and optional refresh token. And the wallet can then use that access token to get a credential from a resource endpoint, which is the credential endpoint, which is protected by the access token. And the issuer would then reply with the issued credential. This is just a really high level view of the flow. So each of these steps, they obviously also have additional security measures and features. And yeah, as I said, the OpenID4VCI can be really used in conjunction with any other OAuth extensions defined by RFCs. And this obviously also includes authenticating the user, but I don't have to go into detail into that right now. But I think now it becomes a little bit more clear if we look at the flow. I mentioned that it supports different flows and user experiences. So this is a traditional OAuth authorization code flow, and how it can be used with OpenID4VCI, or how it would look like with OpenID4VCI. So the assumption is the user has an app, a wallet, and there's an issuer who implements the OpenID4VCI specification. And there's also different ways how to start the issuance process. So there's issue initiated, but also wallet initiated flows. So in that case, that you can see here on the screen, it's a wallet initiated flow. So the user opens the app, unlocks the app, and then the user could see a list of credential issuers that are automatically shipped with the wallet, basically. So in that case, a QEA issuer might be there. And so when the user hits the button, it will actually bounce out to the system browser, go to the QEA provider's website, where the user has to authenticate or identify themselves. And this is the step where a lot of identity verification can happen. So for example, some providers might choose to do like a liveness check, biometric check, and so on, or like anything you want basically is supported. Actually, anything that the provider wants to check or gets checked is supported. And then at the end of that process, when the provider basically check the legitimacy of the user to get the credential, the user would then continue with the app, so that would bounce back into the app, and then the user is typically asked to accept the request, the credential in that case, and the app would then generate key pairs where, for example, like a proof of possession, the credential is bound to, and would then use the access token to go to the credential endpoint, where then the credential provider would respond with the actual credential. And there are numerous steps possible in the wallet. The wallet has flexibility to add any additional security measures on top. Obviously, one of them is like leveraging the secure storage capabilities of the device, which typically requires to unlock the key store and authenticate. So this is a authorization code flow, again, where the flow is initiated by the wallet, and then on the same device. Another flow that was introduced by the OpenID4VCI specification is the pre-authorized code flow. The initial idea was that we wanted to support better in-person credential issuance flows. So for example, when an actual person walks into a field office, but it doesn't really matter. So basically, every time you have like existing flows that do identity verification, legitimacy checks, where like authorization code flow might not fit so well, you could then use this flow. So the idea is that at some point the credential issuer would issue a pre-authorized code and present that to the user. That could be in form of a QR code. It's even possible to send a normal snail mail to the end user's postal address, or you could just display it on a web page. That's basically out of scope. And the user would still need the wallet, obviously. So the wallet then continues with the user opening the wallet, unlocking the wallet, scanning the QR code, which contains the pre-authorized code. And then the difference here is that the user is not required to bounce out to the system browser. So the wallet would immediately send would be able to hit the REST API endpoint, which is the credentials endpoint, with the pre-authorized code, along with an additional transaction code if it's required, because just scanning the QR code might not be the security level that is required in all cases. For that reason, we need to have an out-of-band mechanism, a second factor essentially, to secure the credential issuance process. One option might be, the provider could send a text message, could send an email with that transaction code, and then the transaction code is then entered by the user in the wallet. And when the wallet then does the actual credential request, they would also provide the transaction code. Yeah, so I think that's the pre-authorized code flow. What are the major updates on OpenID4VCI? So we're currently talking about optimizing the batch issuance. So OpenID4VCI supports batch issuance of credentials. So if you don't want to have just one credential from the issuer, but you want to have multiple instances of credentials, then this was already supported, and we are now talking about optimizing this feature. And we have also removed the deferred authorization. In the deferred also not sorry, we have removed the authorization pending option in a deferred authorization flow. There was like, because due to concerns about long-lived authorization codes, and there was also not many implementers. I think there was no implementer that spoke up that this feature should not get removed. So it's better. So we have so if you still want to do this kind of flow, it's still possible. But then you would use the deferred. It would still be able to use the deferred issuance with that. We also have, that's actually been a while, we have a notification endpoint, which basically enables the wallet to notify the issuer about unsuccessful or successful issuance and deletion of the credential by the issuer. So in certain cases, this can improve the user experience and credential lifecycle management. It's an optional endpoint, and implementers can choose to support it or not. And that new endpoint is hosted by the issuer. Other topics that are currently under discussion on OpenID4VCI, we have a lot of discussions on wallet and key attestations during the issuance process. I think people who are familiar with EUDIs and ARF, so there's a lot of discussion on WSEDs and trust evidence and so on. So I think we have these discussions as well. So we are talking about how to best represent those things in OpenID4VCI. It's possible. We just need to define the concrete schemas for those attestations. We're also optimizing, we are discussing whether we want to optimize the number of endpoints. So we are currently talking about the various different pros and cons of having separate credential and batch credential endpoints, and whether or not we should actually merge these two, because we're also talking about a mechanism to allow the issuer to notify the wallet about certain events. So we already have this notification endpoint, but that was from the wallet to the issuer. So this event signaling is really about issuer signaling certain events to the wallet or to the wallet provider. So there's we hosted a session at EUDIW on that and had a working group discussion on that, and I think we concluded basically that this is a feature we want to continue with. And there are different process-related, risk-related, or lifecycle-related events. So one very simple example might be, I have a credential that says I'm under 18, but then the issuer wants to signal basically that the wallet can actually, I turn now 18, then a lot of countries is actually very useful then to obtain a credential then that is over 18 to prove I can do certain things. So in that case, the issuer could actually indicate to the wallet, hey, there is an update of your data, and you can get a new credential, and then it tests that you are over 18. That's just one of the examples, but there is also like a lot of other process and risk-related examples. We also talk about issuer metadata enhancements and issuer metadata that includes specifically the credential issuer metadata, so not necessarily the OAuth metadata. And things were brought up also, I think, at EUDW, like dark mode, so the support of dark mode for specific display parameters. And yeah, I think that's basically it. Kristina, do you have anything to add, or should we just dive into questions?
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Thank you, Oliver. I think I put it in the chat, but we forgot to say in the beginning that this is kind of a new format we're trying out. We want this to be, as you already figured out, the AMA, like ask us anything kind of session. So yeah, the point was not to give you one-on-one, but as Oliver highlighted, give you, the updates that we are mainly working on, plan to work on, what are open questions, what are not. So yeah, keep posting questions in the chat, please. Otherwise it will be a very, very short call. So yeah. But otherwise, yeah, I think we can start going through the questions.
What is the first one? Because I couldn't see this chat yet.
I think it's Alexander's. Hello, am I correct in assuming that the wallet provider will be basically the gatekeeper to the list of available issuers?
So in that case, so basically, so what I think my point was that so OpenID4VCI supports different flows, and so this is a flow here on this slide that describes a so-called wallet initiated flow. It's always possible to have issue initiated flows where you would first go to some issuer website, and in that case you don't need any buy-in from the wallet provider, so there's no how did you call it? There's no gatekeeping needed, so you don't need to interact with the wallet necessarily, with the wallet provider necessarily to enable this. There might be just some wallets that and this depends on the vertical or domain or trust framework that already ship with a list of issuers that are recommended or something like that. Maybe it's not the best word, but basically, if you are in an ecosystem, then it might be useful for user experience reasons to already start with a list of issuers in the wallet, so the user can just go and choose and go to the issuers. But there's no requirement, there's no gatekeeping actually, so because the wallet provider doesn't have to whitelist issuers. It's always possible to also go to the issuer website directly, even if the issuer is not listed in the app, if this makes sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it gatekeeping, but if you want to do wallet initiated flow, it is true that wallet can start sending those serialization requests only to the issuer's endpoint that the wallet already knows, right? So we expect this to be useful for, government-like use cases when you have a government app which says, click here to get digital driving license, click here to get digital tax ID, get here to get your digital marriage certificate. I don't know. But as Oliver already explained, that does not mean wallet is gatekeeping, because the issuer about whom wallet has no idea is always free to send credential offer to the wallet.
Right. So I think one of the use cases that I saw in practice is, you have your existing DMV app that can do DME related things, but then there might be a button which is get me an MDL credential, and then you would hit that button and just automatically then you would bounce out to the system browser to continue with the flow. That's something I saw. I think similar things can happen probably with banks that already have banking apps, and then also want to give the wallet holder the opportunity to get the credential very quickly without having to start in an external browser. Next one, so no gatekeeping, basically, like Kristina said. Next one is discussions about the wallet metadata sent to the issuer before issuance. Yeah, so Frederick, can you elaborate the question maybe? I think we can probably unmute you. So in general, the OpenID4VCI protocol does support discovery of issuer metadata based on well-known. So it's, you have a credential issue identifier, which is an HTTPS URI, and then you would append the well-known to fetch the issuer metadata, which is encoded as a JSON.
I think he's talking about the wallet metadata, right? Not the issuer metadata.
Yeah. Maybe if I can comment. So this is where, so when you start, for example, scanning a QR code, you have the wallet connecting to the issuer. So the wallet is asking for the well-known and to get the issuer metadata. But okay, maybe at this point that the wallet is providing some metadata, that would be to dynamically adapt, the issuer response to this request. But then it will be also maybe interesting at the credential offer step that the wallet is providing metadata. So concretely, it's that today we have a significant difference between the different wallet implementation, and would like to have a standard field so that we know which wallet it is, so that we have maybe some custom, implementation for different wallets. Because today, assuming it's a generic wallet, so this is sometimes where we have difficulties, providing adapted answers because of the processing between the different wallets is today different, even if it's a standard.
I would say it's
Does that make
controlled
sense?
by the, yeah, I think it's controlled by the wallet right now, in the sense that, like the previous question, if the wallet knows the issuer, it assumes that wallet and issuer are already aligned on the, metadata set of metadata. But if the issuer is sending credential offer, so it's not a request, it's just an offer, right? It's just an issuer saying, hey, I want you to issue this credential of this format type. So it's up to the wallet. So if wallet doesn't support the format or type, or it's just issuer metadata and something doesn't match, like the wallet just wouldn't send on the authorization request, right? That's the status quo. Credential offer by definition is not trusted. So I think the best option you have as an issuer is to send a credential offer with, different formats, and hopefully wallet supports one of them. But I think it's very hard to have that wallet metadata exchange before authorization request, because none of those requests are authenticated. We trust it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. This is the status quo, but okay, it was mentioned that, for the issuer metadata of the display, so this is something where there is discussions. But for example, for this display, so today, all the wallets do not implement the display, at the same levels. So having, some metadata on what wallet it is, that would be, that would allow to adapt the display answer, for example.
Yeah. I understand the pain point. I'm just afraid there's not much we can do at a protocol level, in a sense that okay. So sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
At some point,
go
I
ahead.
saw some discussion about, sending the wallet metadata. So I cannot remember exactly where on the OpenID
We did
site
that
it was,
in
but
the we did that in
in which
OpenID4VCI
discussion, because there are so many. But
did you hear my response? We did that in OpenID4VCI spec. But we presented it on Tuesday. We already merged something called request URI method post, where when the wallet is fetching the request object from the verifier's endpoint, wallet can post wallet's capability. So we enabled that in the presentation already, if that's what you're referring to, but that's not issuance, right? I think for
exactly,
issuance,
that would be absolutely equivalent to that, yes.
okay, so and then may I finish the first part of the response?
So
May I finish my response?
sorry?
I have a few things to add. Can I finish?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so 2 points. So one thing we already did in VCI is when the wallet is fetching the issuer's metadata, it can send on some of the, I wouldn't say capabilities, but some of the what wallet supports. So for example, widgets. So for display, like for example, we had a use case where issuer from a regulation perspective has a requirement to support, let's say 28 languages. And as a wallet, if you already know which language your user needs, you don't want to fetch a huge metadata with all 50 languages. So there is a way when you're fetching metadata using the language accept language header, for example, to specify what language you're doing, you need. So at least I think for your display related question, we could play around there maybe. So if you have a bit more specific requirements, we'd be happy to, see if we can introduce some mechanism there. But basically, I think that's a problem that at least Europe seems to be willing to tackle with wallet certifications, right? So somehow trying to harmonize what mechanisms wallets are supported. But yeah, what we can do at the protocol level, I think, is mainly when the wallet is fetching the issuer metadata.
I think if you're interested also as an issuer in the capabilities of the wallet just from a, for example, a security point of view, then it's also possible to use OAuth-based client attestation for client authentication to get the access token. But I think in general, I think I would not be in favor of disclosing the actual wallet provider necessarily. But I think if you're interested in the wallet capabilities from a security perspective, you can do that using OAuth-based client authentication as a client authentication method.
So yeah, so the hardest part was this wallet metadata is disclosing what wallet user has, potentially partially disclosing what credentials user has. Some perceives that as a big privacy risk. So yeah, that's why those has been pretty sensitive. But yeah, we're getting more questions, so we might want to get the next one.
Okay, I think the next one is where and by whom. So on issuer metadata, where and by whom is the decision calculated if the wallet has an attribute that fits a verifier's request?
What? Where and by whom?
So I think when I read the Alexander, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is referring to the presentation of credentials mostly.
Yes.
Yeah, so OpenID4VCI does not necessarily relate to the presentation of credentials. So this is really about the interface between the wallet and the issuer. The interface between the wallet and the verifier is defined by OpenID4VCI presentation. And the decision to the question was basically how does the verifier know whether or not the wallet supports a specific attribute or a credential, right? If this is the case, then
sorry, can we clarify the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like Alexander, do you mean if wallet supports or if the wallet actually has that credential?
It wasn't about supporting, it was about having this information and whether or not the information fits the requested data from the verifier. So, but that am I right in assuming that was actually the first part, that the decision if the provided information from the issuer should fit the verifier's request, this decision is done by the wallet, right?
Yeah, it's done by the wallet, and I'm afraid it's not very realistic for the verifier to know for sure if user has that credential issued or not, because as I mentioned earlier, really seen as a privacy risk. Like for example, malicious verifier just sending requests just to figure out, you know, what credentials user have. And for example, if it's like a cancer credential issued by a cancer association, that could reveal information about the user. So I think the solution potentially here is issuance doing presentation. So when verifier sends the request to present the credential to the wallet, and wallet is like, I don't have it, either because wallet knows who the issuer is, or because in the presentation request, verifier indicated who the issuer is supposed to be. Wallet can start the issuing process, get the credential issued, and present it to the verifier. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. Yep, thanks.
And also,
Yeah.
I saw your follow-up to your first question on the gatekeeping. That was you, right? The gatekeeping question.
Yeah, I think it was the same person.
Yes, it was me.
Did you want to elaborate real quick?
You were answering my question very from a very optimistic standpoint. You said you basically were arguing that no, there's no gatekeeping and nobody will be kept out. But my question was actually going into the direction of, shouldn't there be gatekeeping of who is issuing into the wallet? And
So
whether or not the
So yeah, so I think one mechanism we have built in, it's called signed metadata in the issuer metadata. It's like one of the parameters there. And if you read ARF Annex 2, it actually points to the client metadata in the issuer, but there's no client metadata for the issuer, right? What that actually intends to say is this signed metadata parameter. And the intention there was when wallet fetches the issuer's metadata, that signed metadata has to be signed by the trusted root or the entity that the wallet trusts, right? So for example, in
Okay, yeah.
Europe, if state countries would set up, the CA for the issuers, that CA will provide the signed metadata to this issuer metadata. So when wallet fetches the issuer metadata, it can check if CA has signed or not and make a trust decision.
Okay, so but at the end, when I'm the verifier, when I'm seeing myself on the role of the verifier, I do not have to check this again anymore, because I can assume that the wallet has already done this process, and I do not have to do it at the end again. Right? I'm thinking of a business case as a verifier. So if I receive the information from the wallet, then I can trust it already. The trust is implied already because the wallet has done the process that you just explained now.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question in the sense that when verifier is getting the credential, verifier needs to be able to validate the issuer's signature. So I think as a verifier, you probably want to be able to understand whether that issuer, is a legit public key or not. But yeah, that depends on your verifier's policy as well.
I'm thinking of I'm working for a bank, and I'm thinking of very often we have to prove and show that we have taken all the steps to verify and to document and to be able to show all these steps that we have taken to ensure the best quality of information that we have taken our decisions on. And now I'm asking about the implication of the trust that I'm putting into the wallet, and all the steps that the wallet has been operating on earlier. And at the end, I'm working on a business case, and the business case is filled with data attributes from the wallet, and I'm putting a lot of trust into the data attributes from the wallet, and that was the reason for my asking.
Yeah,
If I have to revalidate certain things, or if there's actually a process for that, or if the trust is implied by the concepts of the wallet itself.
Yeah, I think the trust model assumed right now is the issuer has to make sure it's issuing into the wallet it trusts. That's why there's a lot of investment going on into this wallet attestation, key attestation, whether the wallet's not jailbroken, is wallet backend trusting it, our key is actually stored in hardware or software, depending on your requirement. So the biggest check issuer has to do is whether the wallet is trustworthy or not, so that when verifier is getting credentials with the wallet, the verifier doesn't need to do those checks about the wallet, right? I mean, regulation mentioned that you should, but from a trust model perspective, like we're not anticipating that really. But issuer, I think the current trust assumption is verifier does need to check if that's the issuer that the verifier trusts. So wallet needs to check it during the issuance too, but as a verifier, you need to be able to trust the issuer. Like basically the trust of the whole model is in the issuer.
Yeah, I think something to add here, and I mentioned it earlier. So in this step where the wallet obtains the token, the access token from the issuer, the wallet can use, the issuer can enforce client authentication based on OAuth client attestation, and that WAF might be renamed. But basically, in that case, the issuer has to trust the wallet provider, that the wallet provider issues a wallet attestation after checking the device and the wallet, is still fine. Like does a couple of integrity checks. I mean, there's app attestations, I think you might be familiar with that. You know, Google, I think it's called Play Integrity. On iOS, it's called App Attest. So there's different ways how you can make sure the wallet is still intact and it's not rooted and that stuff. But in that case, you know, you could have a model where the issuer trusts some certain wallet providers to do these checks. And when the wallet then authenticates, does perform client authentication or authenticates against the token endpoint, they would provide those attestations, and the issuer can check those attestations, and they can check that they came from a trusted wallet provider, and then approve or deny the token request accordingly. Does this make sense? Well,
Thank you. Yeah, helped a lot already. Thank you.
so I think next one is there a sequence diagram of the details, all the details of the data exchanges? I guess this is a sequence diagram. It's just opened. Today's sequence diagrams in the specification, so in the OpenID4VCI specification, I can share a link in the chat. Right, how let's do that. This is a link to the latest.
Enrico, are you able to speak?
Yeah, sure.
If you could clarify like which part of sequence diagram you're interested in, because this can be a
You know, all of the sequence of the diagram from the start to the end, if it's possible.
Okay.
So you want an overview.
Because it's very long, I think that all the sequence diagram from the start to the end to the finish, if it's possible.
Okay. I can try. So
Not in this connection, also a link or what a diagram on internet.
Oh, Oliver, let's park it for now. And if we have time, we can come back to it. And yeah, I think you posted the link soon. And also, I'll just put on, also put a link to what SPRIND's German wallet project is like. They also have like very detailed sequence diagrams. So with actual like, you know, very detailed HTTP 200 not. So I'll also post that. That might be helpful as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
The next question is an interesting one, I guess. Is it known if Apple or Google Wallet currently use OpenID4VCI specification when requesting MDLs from state DMVs? So, I mean, that's so in general, I think it's not publicly known what they do under the hood. I think that's all I can say. I mean, I don't know, Kristina, if you can say more about their. We had good active conversations at EUDI. I think that's what we can say. I don't know if we can say more than this.
I mean, I think the short answer is both of the parties have showed interest in the OpenID4VCI specifications, also as part of ISO. But from Android perspective, Android is now part of German Funke, the challenge. And as part of challenge, they will have to build the protocols as defined by ARF and the German architecture document, which does mean building OpenID4VCI and OpenID4VP. So yeah, I think that information can be deducted from what is already public. And this part, you can confirm it's Android, but I think their plan is to make whatever they built for German Funke open source. hopefully. Like, again, I can't speak for them. Yeah. So that's, I think, a really positive development. But yeah, we can't speak anything for Apple, because Google is a bit easier. But yeah, I think the main engagement with platform providers was mainly on the presentation side up until now, because that's where the usage of custom URL schemes and the cross-device security was a bit more urgent. That problem does exist partially in issuance as well, for, you know, how do you get credential offer in target wallet? So that is hopefully on the roadmap, on the radar. But yeah, that is, yeah, that conversation haven't really materialized just yet. Yeah, I think that's what we can share.
All right. I think the next question is again on gatekeeping. I don't know if this is a new question or if we
already answered that, yeah.
I already answered that. Okay, good. Follow-up question was if there will be a trust list on RPs. That's also
Europe,
like,
yes.
yeah, in Europe probably yes, yeah. I mean, certainly. And in other countries and jurisdictions I have observed similar conversations actually.
Yeah, I think that's where the civil society has been playing a significant role, where a lot of concerns they've been bringing in boil down to, yeah, data minimization and you know, no identity oversharing. So one of the specific mechanisms we have to achieve that is verifier authentication, to make sure that malicious verifiers are not requesting sensitive users sensitive digital credentials for no reason.
And this is actually related to OpenID4VCI presentations. So it's
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but OpenID4VP also allows to connecting with different trust frameworks. One model might be based on OpenID for federation. Another model might be EPSI. I mean, different options, you know. And so the OpenID4VP protocol allows the wallet to check whether where actually a request came from, and to verify or authenticate a verifier, and then the wallet can be able to make their own trust decisions based on the information that was provided in that process, in that authentication process. Yeah. Next question is, what should be the ideal integration between the authorization server and credential issuance system in the context of authorization server is a country level DPI? Can you maybe elaborate on that? There's a mechanism for, so I don't know if this answers your question. But in
let's see if you can.
Yeah, because in the OpenID4VCI flow, it's based on the authorization code flow, right? And so the issuer is able to provide some issuer-specific or authorization server-specific UX. And I have seen, for example, implementations that then basically just use the country-specific EID system to authenticate the user, so in that flow. But I don't know if this answers your question, so maybe you can.
He's able to speak. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I've also posted the next question as an use case example. If it's a country level DPI, and if there are so many issuers utilizing that DPI infrastructure for authorization, does each of those people has to go and register? Because already the wallet providers needs to register with authorization server to get the client ID, etc. Right? Now issuer also needs to register. If it's a vast amount, again, this is coming from more of a maintenance perspective. Then it will become a big headache for the central DPI to maintain all the issuers. So I'm trying to understand whether is it possible for us to decouple?
Yeah, so it's decoupled. So the design of the VCI very strictly decouples authorization server from the actual credential issuance points. We're talking about the issuance, right?
If you can go through my next question as a use case, should each university register? I'm again assuming this access token is of a JWT format, and is it required for the credential issuance server to check the audience claim, and should it point to them? Is that a necessity check that a credential server should do before providing the credential?
So honestly, it's an implementation detail between the authorization server and the resource server. So the specification itself will not dictate anything on this. But as a resource server perspective, yes, when the wallet sends you an access token, so credential endpoint of the resource server is access token protected. Like that's the whole point of OpenID4VCI being OAuth API protected flow. So when resource server credential endpoint gets that access token, it needs to be able to validate and understand how it does it. It's out of scope. Whether it forwards it to someone else and gets it, to 100, or it dates it itself, that is the scope of the protocol. And how the authorization server establishes trust with the resource server is also out of scope. So that could be registration, like you're proposing, or that can be an internal federation or any other mechanism. And I think there are a lot of actually drafts on this topic emerging in a wallet pure OAuth space, in the OAuth working group in ITF. I think this trust establishment between a authorization server and the resource server has been a big topic in general in OAuth. So it might be a good idea to take a look there as well.
Yeah, and also to add to this, so in the OpenID4VCI model, the client is actually the wallet. So it's not necessarily so the issuer is not the client of the authorization server. The issuer is just providing the credential endpoint, which is an OAuth2 protected endpoint, protected by this access token that you would get from the authorization server. So the wallet or the wallet provider is the client, and there's most people actually use public clients. Consider the wallet as a public client, so there's no registration of the client needed if this was your concern. To do authentication to a certain degree, at least, based on wallet capabilities, we have the client authentication method, which is based on OAuth attestations. There's an OAuth working group draft on OAuth2 client based OAuth2 client authentication based on what is the current working title? Kristina, sorry, I did get this wrong. Attestation-based client authentication. Sorry,
Yes.
that's but you might actually change the title to assertion because attestation is a little bit confusing. But basically, what I'm trying to say is you don't need to register each wallet.
He's talking about resource server and AS, so Oliver. I don't think he's talking about the wallet registering with AS. No.
Yeah. So there's no need to register actually to do client authentication because it's a resource server, right? As you also just said. But the issuer needs to trust the authorization server, obviously. Another model, and I don't know if this would also solve your use case, is if each of these universities, if they would, can also provide their own issuer and authorization server, and then in the authorization step of the overflow, you could use your country-specific EID system to authenticate the end user. But in that case, you would need to register each university would need to register with the EUD system normally. But I don't know all the requirements, but basically I hope that helps, the different options possible.
Thanks. This was helpful. So the access, what all validation we want to do on the access token is up to the OAuth. OAuth framework is what dictates. So I have to search that. Thanks. That was very helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll put a link to the drafts in the OWASP working group.
Yeah, that will really help.
Okay. There's a question of, in order to prevent colluding verifiers from tracking user activity, is it okay to assume that the current best approach is to use the batch credential endpoint to issue n copies of the same credential, each bound to a different public key? So each verifier sees a different public key. What about revocation? Do you want to take this, Kristina, or should I take this? I can also take it. Yeah, so first of all, I think it depends on the credential format. The current formats that we have, they depend on signatures or keys, let's say. And yeah, it is currently, I think, the best approach to do batch issuance. So you would have multiple instances of a credential issued to the wallet, and one option would be to use the batch endpoint. That's correct.
Yeah,
And,
so for the revocation of that, if you're using, so depending how you're doing revocation, right? I think, for example, in the DL world, you issue a batch of credentials, and all of those credentials they don't have a status list management, like a big string or anything. They're one-time use token, and all of them are valid for 2 weeks, right? So you're accepting, as an issuer, verifier ecosystem, you're accepting the risk that within those 2 weeks, that credential might get invalid, right? So, but for 2 weeks, you have these batches that you can keep using. Or, yes, you can have, you issue a batch of credentials, and they have longer validity than, for example, 2 weeks, so you don't have to refresh by default every 2 weeks. So longer validity, but then when issuer is doing this bit string based, for example, status management, issuer has to maintain the whole batch. And if user is, if let's say for example, user's driving license got revoked, issuer will have to revoke the entire batch, and that issuer will have to figure out how to do it in a privacy preserving way. So we understand there needs to be a lot of considerations on the issuer side. So we're trying to either write them down in the status list spec in IETF or make it informational RFC. It doesn't matter how, but I think we agree we need a list of kind of considerations that issuer needs to take into account when using status list and badge, and make sure it's still privacy preserving. But yeah, if you don't have zero knowledge proofs, I think badge is your best chance to do privacy, to tackle on linkability. But do you have anything to add, Michael, if you can speak?
Yeah, thank you. I have a follow-up question related to this. Let's say I have a PID credential, which is, as far as I know, meant to last for more than 2 weeks. And I need to present that PID credential to new verifiers, so I need to get new copies of that same PID credential. Does the protocol support a way of saying, here's my PID credential, give me n copies of this same credential, but bound to new keys, without
Absolutely.
doing first a presentation and then doing an issuance? I mean, doing this on the same issuance process.
Yeah, so the protocol supports refresh tokens. So at the end of the The token request would result in an access token and optionally a refresh token. So it's at the discretion of the issuer, PID issuer in that case, to give you also a refresh token, which I assume you will get also that one. And with that refresh token, you can get new access tokens, and you can go with the access token, you can go to the credential endpoint multiple times to request additional copies of the PID. So you're not running out of PIDs if you go to new verifiers. And there are different strategies on how to rotate credential instances. That's also like at the discretion of the issuer essentially. But you know, I saw that some people implemented one-time use, or people implemented pairwise instances where you would use the same credential of the same relying party. But you know, there's always like trade-offs, and I guess for you have to make. But basically, the protocol supports issuance of new credential instances because you can use the same access token again.
But in that case, the credential issuer must save or have a way to create those credentials for those tokens. I was thinking about saying, okay, here's my PID credential, which is valid. Clone this credential or give me a copy of this credential. So the credential issuer doesn't need to maintain a state, doesn't need to maintain this access token is entitled to this credential, which I don't want to save for more than necessary. I don't know if
it depends. So access token is opaque to the wallet, right? So it depends as an issuer how you implement the access token. So for example, I wouldn't recommend it because wallets would probably not like if we're doing that, but that access token can be an encrypted credential or reference to a credential, for example, right? So as an issuer, you don't have to maintain state, but when you get the access token, you're the only one who can decrypt it. And you should probably sign and then encrypt based on the recent attacks on Microsoft identity providers. But that's usually the trick that big servers do to not maintain the state. But again, don't quote me. I'm not recommending it, but they're as an implementation easy on the issuer side.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So I think there are no remaining questions anymore.
Yeah, and I think the person who wanted sequence diagrams had to leave. So,
Wow.
Is there any outstanding questions? Please raise your hand. Or I don't know, if you want us to spend time with sequence diagrams, you can indicate as well, but. Maybe one thing, just based on my recent conversations with issuers. Oliver, could you show the UX flows we had in the first deck you used?
Sorry, which one?
The UX diagrams for issuance.
Yes.
So the colors here really indicate who is responsible for what. So yellow part is the issuer, right? So in the authorization code flow, issuer is responsible to authenticating the user as the authorization endpoint. And if you could go to 14 real quick, Oliver. Here, the issuer is responsible to authenticating the user upfront. So these two parts is issuer's responsibility. Like this gives you flexibility as an issuer, but also it's issuer. So the fundamental mental model of this issuance flow is it's issuer who authenticates the user and gathers information about the user that helps the issuer to issue the credential. I'm just saying this because recently there've been some issuers who've been thinking of a model where wallet collects some information about the user on behalf of the issuer. But it is a very different mental model. And right now we're really not recommending you to do that. Because it's really not scalable, right? So, I mean, if there are enough use cases and requirements and whatnot, they might have to extend in the future. But that's basically, it's not just wallet collecting a small field, right? It's when, for earlier questions, when wallet is sending that, whatever wallet collected back to the issuer, it's wallet sending PII, right? So how do you authenticate the wallet to the issuer, how it's being formatted, how does the wallet even know what it needs to gather, what issuer needs? Does wallet need to validate value type or whatnot of what it's collected? What if wallet's sending garbage to the issuer? So it's a lot of questions. And it might work for your specific use case, one specific use case, but when we're thinking of this entire ecosystem, to make, if you really want, you know, adoption and vibrant ecosystem, the issuer gathering, authenticating the user is the way to go. They believe. So that's why, for example, one areas of investigation is credential presentation during issuance. Like, for example, in Europe, if wallet already has PID issued to it, and to issue whatever credential you want to have level of assurance high, I'm assuming PID is level of assurance high. Maybe the way you authenticate the user is you request presentation of PID from the wallet during issuance. And you know, in that case, potentially you could do everything in the wallet. So the wallet screen would look like user gets a request saying, hey, issuer's trying to issue this credential. And next screen is, do you consent presenting PID to this issuer? Yes, you got the credential, for example, right? So yeah, please try to, you know, be creative within issuer taking responsibility for user authentication, if that makes sense.
We have one new question from Matthias. Can you elaborate more about the wallet identification request number 3 from the last slide with the diagram? Are you referring to this diagram and step number 3 here, authorization request, client ID?
I'm sorry, Matthias. Okay, let me try on mute. Can you speak?
Matthias, can you speak?
Oh yeah, he's unmuted. We can hear you, but very quietly.
Now?
A bit louder.
No?
I can hear you, but a bit louder.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I will try. Yeah, exactly. The slide number 45 and the request number 3. Exactly. I want to kind of check if kind of possibility. So generally, my question is how I can make a trust or be sure that the wallet is kind of allowed by me, by my system, or by the issuer here.
Right.
So, for example, I want to be sure that only, for example, my internal kind of application or build my own wallet, with the kind of SDK, for example. And I want to kind of be really sure that when I create the issuance request, I want to be really sure that it will be saved in my dedicated wallet.
Right. I think the general answer I can provide is, since OpenID4VCI is based on OAuth, you can use all client authentication methods that are possible in OAuth. So I think what we observed, or what I observed, I guess many other people also observed, is that in a lot of cases, the wallet is a public client, which cannot really hold a secure secret, cannot hold a secret securely. And then the question gets more interesting. So how do you trust that public client, which is a public wallet application, for example? And this the answer is basically that a lot of people are looking into the, and again, OAuth
So
patient-based
so-
client authentication method. I think Kristina already provided a link to that previously. Sorry for interrupting you, Kristina. But this
Oh,
is
no,
my
it's
answer. Maybe Kristina has something to add here as well.
yeah, so client authentication in OAuth does not happen at step 3. It does not happen in authorization request. So the basic model for OAuth is the first authorization request is front channel. So it's a redirect in the browser, right? So it's not very trustable, but you need it to authenticate the user to make sure, you know, who you're talking to as a user. So that's where, you know, you can do passwords, whatnot. And the second token request, which step 6 and 7, is when this actual authentication of the client happens, because that's when the communication becomes backend to backend. That's where you're not talking to a front end anymore. You're talking to a backend that can actually do the key management. So you can do, you know, private key job and whatnot. So the answer is you should do authenticate the client, the wallet in this case, because wallet is acting as a client in a sense, but it happens in step 6 from the key management and security perspective, because that's when you can start using backend. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So if you need, so this because this is based on OAuth, right? And this is the authorization code flow, like the plain OAuth authorization code flow. But there is also something that is described in, does actually Hype recommend the push authorization requests? So PAR is one way of, it's another way of doing this. It's, you know, PAR is also an RFC.
Yeah,
and,
great point, Oliver. So there's a RFC code, yeah, push authorization request, where if you want to authenticate upfront, that's where the wallet can have a backend that posts to the issuer. Oh, sorry. If wallet has a backend, the issuer posts that request to the wallet's backend. No, sorry. I'm sorry. In this case, wallet's a client, so wallet posts to the issuer's backend, and that's where the wallet using backend can authenticate when it's posting to issuer's backend. And after wallet posts a request to the issuer generates a URI where wallet can get the authorization request, basically.
Yeah, so this basically you have the flexibility to do it after you authenticate the user or before you authenticate the users. I think you know, OAuth 2 is a framework and it has a lot of tools for you to model your use case.
May take the next question, Oliver. I think Mike was asking, is a credential issuer metadata the preferred method to obtain the example public keys of the issuer to validate the credential signature? So it's not really. Meaning credential issuer metadata is not. So it's separate. It's more about the metadata about the issuer. And for example, if you have total known based resolution, like is defined as .vc, you can have separate endpoint like .vc open. So .known/.vc issuer where you store the keys, or if you're having an X509 chain, you can use that. Or if you have DIDs, you can trust the DID, you can keep using that orthogonal from credential issuer metadata. But what usually happens is you still need to establish trust in that DID, right?
So I think the general answer might be also like it's credential format specific. Usually you would do the credential and information contained in the credential, be it through an included DID or through additional metadata resolution. But you have to look at inspect the credential and check whether anything you can get out of the pass out of the credential can be used to verify whether the credential was issued by a trusted issuer, and that process is also like out of band. So how you trust certain issuers is completely orthogonal. That's a topic then for OpenID Federation or EIDAS or whatnot.
Yeah, so I just checked. We don't even have JWKS URL parameter as well as the credential issue metadata parameters. So
Okay.
we're really taking a modular approach where issuer metadata is everything you need for the protocol perspective. And then you have to use, other mechanisms to get the keys.
Yeah, I was thinking about the European wallet, the EIDAS, and a credential format such as selected disclosure JSON Web Tokens. You can have an ISS claim, which is basically the credential issuer, the server implementing OpenID for verifiable credential issuance. I know that I can use that feed or that claim to get that URL and then ask for the keys. And I think that makes sense. The question was that the spec OpenID4VCI or for VP typically don't include examples about using DIDs. And I don't know if it's because the preferred way of doing this is using that credential issuer metadata, or it's just because it's left up to the implementers to choose whatever method to get those keys.
Yeah, so I think the SD.
I'm sorry, I just did Control F DID colon in OpenID4VP, and we have 28 instances of DID. So there are at least 28 places where it's ISS equals DID. So there are examples where, like from a spec perspective, we're not preferring any key management perspective. Like DIDs are there, and this question is more relevant for presentation, not really issuance. Like in issuance, the wallet doesn't really need to know the issuer's keys unless you're using signed metadata. It's a verifier who needs to obtain issuer's keys, right? Sorry, Oliver, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you want to use dates with SD short VCs, yeah, you can use so even the SD short VCs back in IETF mentions how you would obtain the public key from the issuer using DIDs. So that's one of the options that's possible. Again, it's not there's no recommended option in a spec. But if you want to do that, you can do that.
Right, would VCI pre-authorized code flow allow something similar to Apple Wallet push provisioning flow for payment cards? For example, pushing a payment card to Apple Wallet directly from issuer banking app without additional issuer authentication. Yes. Yeah, basically. So in pre-authorized, would you like to show next slide, Oliver? 46, is that pre-authorized code flow? Yeah, so for pre-authorized code flow, as you can see, there is no authorization point, right? So the first actual protocol request is token request, which is backend to backend. So from the user experience perspective, it's really, as long as and it doesn't have to be scanning a QR code, right? As long as a user has the pre-authorized code, not the user, the wallet, as long as the wallet has pre-authorized code, it's backend to backend. So there's no more user interaction. Does that
Except for the additional indication factor. The wallet might prompt the user to enter an additional transaction code. I think it was also mentioned in the.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah.
This slide.
That's
no,
presentation.
sorry. That was the presentation. So here, so the fourth screen also has this optional transaction code, which might be reasonable for security reasons.
So it's not really push because the wallet needs to send token request. And in response to that, the issuer will issue a credential. But yeah, looks like you can't unmute yourself, but yeah. Oh, you can. Does that make sense, Armand, or?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next question is a long one.
Who
Full of questions
wants to
here.
read?
One of the questions we had in our last call on OpenID4VP. So I guess it relates to the app-to-app issuance flow, app-to-app presentation flow, like third-party app request credentials from a native wallet. And the question is there any way for some native mobile app to request verifiable data from any capable wallet app the user may have installed on a device, perhaps by being shown a list of installed wallets to choose from? Yeah, so I think, I mean, this has like a few interesting aspects. So I think, so first of all, you can, for example, ISO MDL specification, they introduced a custom UI scheme for that many different wallets might implement, and depending on the platform, the user can choose to which wallet should respond to the request. But normally there's really just one wallet. But if you have multiple ones, then on Android there is no issues. iOS the situation is a little bit more complicated. But this is essentially where the W3C, WICG browser API or identity credentials API, I think it's now called, where this is interesting because they would be able to allow credential selection. So the user would then be able to go through that. A native UI presented by the mobile platform where the user can then choose which credential to pick to answer the request, and the mobile platform will make sure that the credential is then
but that is browser API. So that's when the verifier is, say, JavaScript running in the browser. It's not for app to app.
Yeah, sorry. That's true. But there's one caveat. So while there is a standard in W3C that allows you to do that through web browsers, so it's a JavaScript API. There is already so basically on Android, it's already possible that you write that you're experimenting with this API, where you would then send in OpenID4VP request to a mobile platform API that basically looks like the same as the browser API. And with that, you would be able to achieve that. But at the moment, it's just at experimental stage, I would say. So you can do experiments, but I wouldn't do. It's pretty hard to rely on that API because it's subject to change. It's pretty new, pretty fresh. So might be. But this is essentially one of the hot topics that are being discussed, and so in the future. Well, actually, it's possible then to use some OpenID4VP routed through the mobile platform API or browser API to achieve that. I mean, if you want to do third-party apps, then you would have to use like a platform API. But again, so that platform API is not standardized. It's provided by like the platform vendors, Android, for example, and on Android at the moment, they are copying the API that is that will be available in the browser. So they copy them for native apps, but on other platforms that might look different. That's all I can say on that. The other option would be, as I mentioned earlier, using custom schemes and yeah.
So I think, in short, there's no Google or Apple mediated app-to-app API that would allow you any wallet selection right now. The work is happening on browser to native app. So maybe in the future, if the ecosystem takes up, they'll have app-to-app API for that as well, but not right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's experimental stage. So again, so it's on Android. I saw a presentation recently by Google that presented that flow.
Was it
on Android.
app-to-app?
Yeah, it's app to app. Yeah. I saw it
Oh, okay,
yesterday.
then maybe I'm wrong. Okay, sorry. Okay. Then
No, I
there's
saw it
experiencing.
yesterday again on some call.
Okay, that's cool.
But nothing. I think that's the same demo that they presented at EUDI, essentially. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's one I answered. There was a question if there's a standard way to discover validated URL given a credential which has an issuer ID given as a DID. So in the context of VCI, in the context of issuance, the way you discover issuer metadata is you append .well/OpenID credential issuer, right? So for that you would need a URL. But if you read the specification carefully, it does not say anywhere that is the only way to get issuer metadata. So that's kind of, there are issues, I think issue open to mandate it, but right now it's not. So if your issuer wants to define a discovery mechanism based on a DID, so it's this whole metadata file, right? With endpoints, whatnot, like you have to define it. Basically, but all of the implementations where issuer uses DIDs that I know at least, you'd use HTTPS URL for issuer discovery. So that's kind of status quo / up to you. In the VP context, when verifier is fetching the issuer's key using DID, that's nothing metadata, right? It's standard DID document resolution. You get the key from the DID document, however your DID method defines. So I think the question is kind of different from VP VCI. I haven't talked about this for a while. Does that make sense?
Thank you. That makes sense. But what you're saying is in the issuer's case, predominantly HTTPS URL is used as issuer.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
In issuance, yeah.
Okay.
So
protocol allows DID. So the protocol allows DID, but how DID will resolve to the metadata is not covered within the protocol. It is up to the DID, something I can understand, but again, it becomes an interoperability problem, right? If there is no standard mechanism of doing this.
Yeah. So we had that discussion but in the end, working group satisfied. Yeah, HTTPS URL is the most used way right now, so let's stick to it.
Thanks.
Oh, that was a great another wave of questions. We answered everything.
I think we answered everything, yeah. I think so.
That's great. I think someone was putting in the chat and Oliver, you responded. But yeah, feel free to open the issue. But if it's a question, clarification question, as a chair, I would personally prefer a question on the mailing list. But if GitHub issues what you prefer, that's totally fine as well.
Kristina, would you mind, or you or Oliver mind putting a link to the mailing list and the GitHub issues in chat? This way I can add it into the thank you note so everyone's got it after the fact. We don't
Oh.
want to, I don't want
That's
someone to
great.
not be able to reach out.
It's a great, wait. Well, that was quick,
Awesome.
Oliver. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Oliver.
So yeah, we'll have to unmoderate you. So if you send the mailing list question without signing an IPR agreement, to reach out to you and ask you to sign first. Once that step is done, yeah, all good. Yeah. I also had to say something, forgot. Oh, yeah, so the format is, this format, as I said at the beginning, is really, experimental. It's really us kind of trying to do what we've been doing really here, to answer any kind of small, big question. So I don't know if OpenWallet Foundation has like a feedback form, but any feedback is welcome. Yeah, if it's helpful, we might do it again regularly here or in DCP working group, doesn't matter. But yeah, please
Yeah,
give us feedback.
as staff, Kristina, anytime you or Oliver want to do an AMA or workshop, give me a call. We would love something like this
Okay.
again. It's been fantastic. And I'd really like to thank everyone who's attended. I don't want to end this meeting if someone's got a question, so please raise your hand or put a comment in chat. But thank you all for joining us as well. So I'm not ending the call. If you have another question for this incredible team, please post it in there. But anytime you or Oliver want to do something, Kristina, reach out. We'll get it set up.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thanks everyone for joining.
All right, people are saying thank you in chat, which I appreciate, but no one's giving a question to these two, which maybe that means we're good.
Okay.
All right, I would love to thank you, Kristina. Thank you, Oliver, for doing such a fantastic job. Thank you for all the attendees for both day one and day two for asking such great questions. Once this video encodes, I'm going to get it up on YouTube. I'm going to post it to the OpenWallet Foundation blog and Discord. I'm going to send out a thank you note probably tomorrow once I get the list processed. But thank you all, and keep an eye on what this team is doing. This is really great work, and it's super important. Kristina and Oliver, do you have any last words for our attendees?
Yeah, one quick advertisement. So the series are intended to be standards underlying area, which is not only OpenID4VCI, as probably most of you know. So the plan is to hopefully do similar sessions where demystifying the relationship between SDJ, SDJ.VC, SDJ.VCD, and so maybe ISO MDL, and then this client attestations that we've been mentioning that we are planning to use for wallet attestations and the status mechanisms. So I think those 4 big topics is what we were hoping to have it similar AMAs. So yeah, so please keep an eye on that. And if you speak German, I think German project also we're thinking of doing something in German. So yeah. Hopefully there's more of this happening in different languages.
Oliver, any last words?
No, I think again, just a second what Kristina just said. Thank you for the invitation, and also looking forward to having more of these AMAs.
Brilliant. And thank you again, Kristina and Oliver. Thank you to the OpenID team for being a part of this. Thank you to all the attendees who showed up. OpenWallet.Foundation is our URL. For those who registered, you're going to get an email with a thank you. And the links that were shared, I'm going to go through the chat and pull all the links out. I'm going to check with Kristina and Oliver if we can get a PDF of the deck that they've been sharing over these 2 sessions, so folks can see that. And thank you all for these great questions and for your time. That's it. I'm going to end this call now officially because no one's giving me any more questions. Oliver and Kristina, you are free. Thank you so much, y'all.
Thank you,
Have a
Sean.
good
Thanks
one,
a lot for
everybody.
your great energy. Yeah.
No worries. Have a good one.
Bye.